where's Tony Romo going to play in 2017?
It's a question that everyone is asking, and I'll tell you, no one has any answers still. I know that there's been talk this week that Tony Romo is expecting to be released, and that has been an expectation all along that the Cowboys would do right by their former starter on this team. The Joneses feel a sense of loyalty to Tony Romo. If they were to release him, that would allow them to fully explore the market because right now teams have to really decide whether they want to pick up the price tag that is attached with Tony Romo right now. So you're going to have to find a team that's under the cap and that wants to pay Tony what he's owed. Now, if they were to trade him, at least they could get something out of it. You know, right now they don't have a ton of picks this year. They're not going to have that 5th round pick. They traded that for Matt Castle 2 years ago. That goes to the Buffalo Bills. So they could at least get some mid-round picks out of a potential Tony Romo trade. But right now they're just exploring the market. I will tell you that while Tony may have told someone that he's expecting to be released, it's my understanding the Cowboys haven't told him exactly what they plan to do.
Yeah, and they're going to try to get that value back like Jane just mentioned here. It's going to be a little bit difficult for a number of reasons. One, the current contract, which is going to have to be redone, obviously. And second, the compensation is going to have to be some kind of conditional compensation. If he stays on the field, if he plays this well, if he throws this many yards, if we make the playoffs, all that kind of stuff, that's going to factor in because the Cowboys are going to want a high ceiling on that, but the team that is making the deal is going to want a really low floor. So that's going to be part of the problem. But I will say this, I do expect the Jones family, I do expect Dallas upper management to make sure that if they do make a trade, that Romo has at least a little bit of say on this one because the relationship between those sides still remains strong, and they want to do right by him even if they're doing right by the franchise.
And Mike, it is compelling. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Greg.
Well, I was going to say they want to do right by him, and I'm hearing, Tony Romo's interested in Houston. Think about what Bob McNair would have to swallow to go after Tony Romo. That means he has to accept paying Brock Osweiler $16 million in cash this year and then paying Tony Romo a similar amount on top of that. That is hard to imagine, especially when the front office just blew their quarterback decision a year ago.
It's hard to imagine, but I do think that if he was able to swallow his pride a little bit and also swallow the fact that he's going to have to pay a quarterback that much to have those two quarterbacks on his roster, I do think you get a highly motivated quarterback in Tony Romo. This is a competitive guy that we've seen in Dallas. He may be 37. He may have a history of injuries, but Houston would make a lot of sense for him right now. Keep in mind this week, his wife, Candace Romo, announced that they would be expecting a child in August. That's right around training camp. That's a lot to put on a guy's plate. It's an easy Southwest Airlines flight from Houston to Dallas that allows him to still be close to his family and still go after a Super Bowl ring, something that he wants. Houston's under the cap right now, and they've sure got a heck of a defense.
Yeah, and those logistics all make sense. And I go back to what Greg said. If you're already locked in and you're paying Osweiler that much money, as long as Romo, you can fit it in, as long as it makes financial sense. And again, I don't think anybody out there is going to be paying him $20 million anyway. If you're already locked into Osweiler, then this could make the perfect sense to bring in Romo because you know that you're already punting on the year with Osweiler if you don't believe in him. And it doesn't seem like they really have a whole lot of confidence in him for sure.
And I think we can all agree that only happens if the Cowboys, in fact, release him and he's able to go to a new team and completely restructure a deal. They're not going to pay him what he's going to be owed here in Dallas.
Yeah, between Romo or the Cowboys, somebody will have to make some sort of concession on how much the relationship means to them in terms of where he goes in his future. Moving on to the Giants now. Greg, the story of the Giants last offseason was defensive spending. What are we going to be talking about this time around?
Well, you could start with some defensive spending because Jason Pierre-Paul, Jonathan Hankins are free agents. That's half their starting defensive line. But I'm thinking about their quarterback position. I feel like Giants fans, maybe the Giants coaching staff, they need to have an honest conversation about where Eli Manning is right now. Eli Manning held this offense back. Eli Manning was part of the problem with this offense last year. He's turning 36 years old. You have these two great young wide receivers. There's questions on the offensive line, but I think they have to start thinking about life after Eli in the draft. It's probably not going to be in free agency, but you got to start planning for 2018 and thinking about maybe Eli Manning's not the quarterback. Not everyone's going to age like Tom Brady and be great till he's 39 years old.
The backup quarterback currently on the roster is Ryan Nassib, who they drafted a couple of years ago, and I don't sense out of that building a whole lot of confidence in Nassib's capabilities of being a full. We haven't even seen him, to be honest with you, because Eli has been so durable. But just based on what they're seeing day in and day out, I don't get that sense that at some point Manning is going to pass the torch to Nassib, or that they believe that that's going to be the case. So if they're going to find the guy, Greg, you're right, it's going to wind up being in the draft. And I do believe we're close to that point where this team is going to start to look ahead. I can't imagine it happens in the first round, but maybe with a second round or third round pick, you start to think about that if you're Jerry Reese.
And Mike, down in Washington, people believe that they found their guy a year ago in Kirk Cousins. What are the chances that he's not in Washington next year?
They're more than 0%. I'm not going to say they're 50. It's somewhere in there. Now, I know that there's a report out there that says that Cousins doesn't want to be in Washington. Here's what I can gather, and Kirk wasn't available, and his agent declined comment on that one when I tried to get to him today. But here's what I can gather up to this point. As long as the money is there, as long as he finally gets the respect from the organization that he's been looking for, then Kirk Cousins would like to be in Washington. But they weren't at that point last year. As a matter of fact, they only offered him $5 million more guaranteed on top of the tag that was already in place. So he never even came close to thinking about taking that one. And based on this past year, he showed a little bit more, and it was an impressive year for a lot of the season. He did make some questionable decisions down in the red zone, but I can't imagine Scott McCloughan, the general manager, was suddenly blown away by Kirk Cousins. So I think they're still in this cycle. I was told by someone familiar with the team's thinking that even if he does get the franchise tag, doesn't guarantee he's going to be a Redskin, that they could still try and make a trade there, perhaps to San Francisco, perhaps.
And it's interesting, Mike, that you say he wasn't available and neither was his agent. You know, I was able to catch up with him at the Pro Bowl, and he sort of sidestepped my question to him. Do you want to be back in Washington? I also talked to him and asked him if he thought he deserved a long-term deal, and he basically sidestepped that one as well, saying that's up for people like you and me, Mike, to talk about that on the television set. But he feels like he's done what he needs to do. It's getting expensive for D.C. to continue to franchise this guy. But, you know, just talking to guys that have played with him and play alongside him, he's the type of guy they'd like to see back. They have a lot of respect for him. They like his approach. They like his passion. But I can imagine he is getting a little frustrated. They are maybe not seeing him long-term the way that he feels that he should be valued in that city.
I feel like not getting a long-term deal done is a recipe for disaster for this team. They could lose Pierre Garçon. They could lose Deshaun Jackson. They didn't really get the defensive coordinator that they wanted. There's a lot of questions on that defense. Suddenly, if he's on a one-year contract and next season starts going sideways, you start thinking about the Redskins of old and them being back at the bottom of a very tough division.
Yeah, looking ahead to the future, you wonder if there will be this franchise discussion with Kirk Cousins on into perpetuity. Greg, let's look into the Eagles now and Howie Roseman. You think they're going to be pretty active?
Well, I do. This is Howie Roseman season. It's March. Every year the Eagles are active, and you look at their roster. They have so many players that they could cut in terms of Connor Barwin and Jason Kelsey and Ryan Matthews and Jason Peters. And then you think of the holes that they have on the offensive line, wide receiver, cornerback. They are always going to be active. So forget about the salary cap. They don't have that much room. They will make room. The same teams year after year are making noise in March, and Howie Roseman is nothing if he's not aggressive. I expect it again this year.
Greg, you're right. And people get too caught up in a team doesn't have enough cap room. The Cowboys are another team that always creates cap room. Now, they're always up against the cap because they keep kicking that can down the road. But in the Eagles' case, there will be moves made to create cap space. One of them is Jason Peters, who you just mentioned. Now, there's talk that he's been asked to take a pay cut. It's not necessarily the case. There are certain or a couple of contingencies being discussed right now, according to sources. One of them could be an extension, and not a big extension, but an extension that allows him to not take a pay cut, but move some of that cap money into the future. So look for that as a possibility. Now, they will be active. It's just that they won't be as active as last year, and they were extremely active last year, whether it was trades and signings and moving up in the draft to go get Carson Wentz. You won't see that kind of action, but Howie Roseman is getting itchy this time of year.